And welcome to the sixth event in our Faculty Forum series hosted by the Music Therapy Faculty Forum Steering Committee. I'm Andrew Knight, an Associate Professor of Music Therapy at Colorado State University. Along with Vicky Vega at Loyola, we co-chair the Steering Committee, a group of 8 educators looking to host these forums to support music therapy educators and provide a space for important conversations around music therapy education. In addition to the two of us, I'd like to make sure you know the rest of the committee: Susie Sorrell from Malloy, Melanie Kwan from Washington Adventist, Jen Schreibman from University of Indianapolis, Raquel Ravaioli from Marietta College, Debbie Gombert from Eastern Michigan University, and Andy McGraw-Hunt from Rowan University. In particular, Vicky and Susie were the liaisons from the committee that put together tonight's event. The mandate of the steering committee is to look at a future organizational structure for shared faculty governance and to create these events to engage in the tasks of the steering committee, which are to establish trust, build community, and create avenues for conversation, to be conscientious of not taking a side on issues, and to serve as a liaison between faculty and AMTA. We have been and will continue to be a group that encourages open and collegial conversation amongst all participants while maintaining independence from AMTA and any other formal music therapy body. If you have topics to suggest to us for future events, email any of us individually or at musictherapyfaculty, all one word, musictherapyfaculty @gmail.com. Tonight, we're talking about the Cbmt exam, an important topic that's been coming up on our post-event surveys for a while now. So for right now, I'll turn it over to Susie to introduce our presenters this evening.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited and happy to be able to introduce our guest speakers who did such an interesting study regarding the BC exam, and we're going to hear the results of that study tonight. So please welcome Lillian Eyre. Lillian is an assistant professor at Temple University, and she also used to be the director of music therapy at Immaculata, and was the adjunct professor at University of Quebec in Montreal. I think we're all familiar with Lillian's clinical work and her writing and her supervision. So welcome, Lillian, to this forum. We're excited to hear from you. And a special welcome to Tony Meadows, who is the Director of Music Therapy Studies and Coordinator of Graduate Music Therapy at Shenandoah University. The former editor of Music Therapy Perspectives, has millions of years of clinical experience, and incepted the Faculty Forum. I don't know how many years ago that was, but got this whole forum going. So we appreciate that, Tony. And so I'm going to turn the next 20 to 30 minutes over to you to present your PowerPoint on what was revealed in the study. So Raquel, could you make, I think it would be easiest if we make Tony the co-host so that he can share his slides. If not, I could do it. Great, perfect. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks everybody for the invite, and Lillian and I are really happy to share the results of our study with you tonight. Just a sound check. Can you hear me clearly?
Sounds good, Tony.
Great, thank you. So tonight Lillian and I are going to spend about the first 30 minutes. We're trying to keep the summary findings to 30 minutes or less, so we can open up the discussion. And what we're going to do is primarily just to present the findings from the study without a lot of interpretation, other than the way we alert you or just focus you on the results themselves. So as a reminder about what the study is about, we are interested in faculty perceptions of the Cbmt exam. So the ways that they view the exam, the relevance of the exam to clinical practice, etc. And we'll get into those study findings in just a wee bit. So as some of you may know, Lillian and I worked together at Immaculata for a number of years, and we, like I think many of our colleague faculty, felt pretty good about how our students did in the exam, and felt that we could usually know when students were going to struggle and know which students tended to do well. This is early on in our careers as faculty, and over time we felt that shifted, and we became increasingly concerned with the number and the types of students that were failing the exam, particularly amongst our undergraduates. We saw on enough occasions that it really came into our awareness, students who we thought were very fine, reflexive clinicians who received really strong reports for their clinical work in practicum and internships struggle with the exam, and students that we would rate as competent without being excellent clinicians passing the exam first time. And it was and remains really perplexing to us about what might be the reasons for that and the extent to which the exam is therefore an indicator of clinical competence. And as we were talking and thinking more about these things, we noted some changes that were happening. So the first was that faculty input to the exam changed and faculty were not permitted to serve on the exam committee. The second, as we'll share with you, is changes to the cut scores, so that there's been an overall decrease in first-time pass rates. And then comments, including those from CBMT, suggesting that academic programs aren't keeping up. And so, so we really wanted to understand more, well, what do faculty think about the exam? So here's some more context. So over the last 10 years, the passing point cut scores have changed. So from 2005 to 10, the cut score pass rate was 86. It changed to 91, and then 2015 to 17, it changed to 95. In the same time frame, the percentage of first-time test takers passing the exam fell. So from 2005 to 10, it was 84%. 2010 to 15 was 79, and 2015 to 17 to the second quarter was 70%. When we look at the average pass rates of educational programs across time, there are some notable differences. So in 2005, 43% of educational programs had an average pass rate for first-time test takers above 90%. And at the same time, only 10% of educational programs had an average pass rate below 70%. Looking 10 years later in 2015, only, or 47% of educational programs were at 70% below, and only 15% of educational programs had an average pass rate at 90% or above. So in essence, from 2005 to 2015, the average score pass rates in the high and low categories have in essence flipped places. So this led us to in a sense, why we were interested in doing this study, just beyond our experiences as educators. We hoped and continue to hope that the survey provides a perspective for us as faculty to discuss the relationship between our academic programs, students' clinical competence, and the exam. It was at the time our efforts to help to provide a perspective about the debate about MLE as an entry level for the profession, which was undecided at the time that we created the survey. And then to add to discussions about the challenges created for faculty when they're required to address AMTA professional competencies and Cbmt domains in the same curriculum. So our research questions were as follows. What are faculty perceptions? And in our case, this is program directors. And we chose program directors because we believe that they have the broadest perspective on the curriculum in their role as running an academic program, often with multiple levels. And we felt that as a starting place, asking program directors about their perceptions was a way to get an overall perspective from each of the academic programs. So we asked questions about the effectiveness of the Cbmt exam in evaluating competence to practice as a music therapist, effectiveness of the exam in evaluating the Cbmt domain areas, the meaningfulness of the exam, the challenges that faculty have if they do, preparing students for the exam, and the challenges, if they do, that faculty report, sorry, the changes, not the challenges, the changes, if any, that faculty report in relation to the CBM exam. So after we constructed the exam, we gained IRB approval from Shenandoah, and then we sent out an email invitation to 72 program directors. This was all of the program directors at the time. And in total, 41 program directors participated, which is just under 57% of program directors at the time. The survey included 18 Likert scale questions and 6 open-ended questions. And here is a summary of the results. So this doesn't include all the results, but includes some of which we hope are pertinent for our discussions tonight and might be helpful for you in discerning. So the first response that might be of interest actually has to do with how effective the CBMT exam is in evaluating competence to practice. So we asked program directors, to what extent, if at all, do you perceive a relationship between your students' overall clinical competence and their exam performance? And you'll see a spread from unrelated to very related. Approximately, I'm sorry, I don't know why my computer is jumping. So you'll see approximately 10% believed that the exam is unrelated to clinical competence, approximately 22 somewhat unrelated, approximately 10% neither related nor unrelated, approximately 44% somewhat related, and approximately 15% very related. Or described in another way, about 32% of respondents felt it was either somewhat unrelated or unrelated. 58% felt it was somewhat related or very related, and 10% neither related nor unrelated. We asked questions about the relationship between academic grades and clinical competence and exam performance. So we shared 2 with you. So the first is the relationship between clinical competence and exam performance. So approximately 32% felt that it was either somewhat or unrelated, 10% neither related nor unrelated, and 59% somewhat related or related. When asked about the relationship between academic grades and exam performance, approximately 18% felt it was either unrelated or somewhat unrelated, and approximately 75% somewhat related or related. The second response level to do with academic grades and exam performance seems to be connected to some of the individual responses that Lillian will share, where faculty commented that they believe that the exam is a test of test-taking abilities. Okay, the next series of questions have to do with the Cbmt domains and faculty perceptions about the effectiveness of the exam in evaluating student competence in the domain areas themselves. And so you see the 4 domain areas on the left-hand side, and you see the spread of responses. So if you look on a whole, you'll see there's a lot of variability in perceptions about effectiveness. In general, if you look at referral, documentation and professional development, you'll see a spread in which approximately 25% plus or minus tend to rate referral, documentation, and professional development as either ineffective or somewhat ineffective. And approximately 58 to 59% of respondents rate each of those domain areas somewhat effective or effective. A different kind of variability in responses was in the treatment, implementation, and termination responses, where 39% of respondents felt the exam was either ineffective or somewhat ineffective in measuring clinical effectiveness in treatment, implementation, and termination, and 51% somewhat effective or effective. And if you look at the two outliers, on the whole, the respondents rated between 7 and 10% as the exam is being ineffective in each of these areas, and approximately 24 to 27%, about a quarter, as effective. So let's talk briefly about CBMT responses to the changes in test scores, and then we'll get into also faculty responses. So from CBMT's perspective, possible reasons for declining scores. This is from the MLE document. This is just a brief summary of Executive Director Schneck's comments, in which she explained that in the arena of credentialing, it's expected that education drives clinical practice and moves it forward. And that from the perspective of the declining first-time pass rates, the CBMT data do not reflect the realisation of this expectation. While music therapy clinical practice is advancing, Executive Director Schneck suggests, as reflected in the MLE final report, part 1, in the practice analysis and in increased cut scores, the change is not being driven by music therapy education, as indicated in the declining pass rates. Executive Director Schneck also noted that the current board certification domains, updated after each of the practice analyses, contain items currently assessed in the exam which do not appear in the AMTA professional competencies or are found only in the advanced competencies, which she suggests might be another potential cause for declining pass rates. Executive Director Schneck also suggested possible reasons for declining pass rates, including inconsistencies across programs and internships, anxiety about the MTV requirement for employment, time between internship and taking the exam, limited experience with multiple choice exams, application analysis of knowledge versus memorization, poor study skills and/or test-taking skills, and a possible increase in ESL students. So we asked participants to respond to Executive Director Schneck's statement that she made that was published in the MLE report. So when asked the extent to which they agreed with this statement, while music therapy clinical practice is advancing, as reflected in the practice analysis and increased cut scores, the change is not being driven by music therapy education, as indicated in the declining pass rate. 18% of respondents disagreed, 15% somewhat disagreed, 15% neither agreed nor disagreed, 23% somewhat agreed, and 30% agreed. Factory perceptions of reasons why students could or might fail the CBMT exam. So we asked this question. So you'll see in the left-hand column, we asked a series of questions about why students might fail the exam, which includes, I do not teach to the exam, I'm unable to provide the breadth and depth of coursework, my philosophy is inconsistent, and fieldwork and internship supervisors share equal responsibility. Once again, you see this relatively similar kind of spread of responses from disagree to agree. I'll just give you a moment to have a look at that. And I'd like to focus just for a minute on the fieldwork and internship supervisors response, that it's fieldwork and internship supervisors share an equal responsibility in preparing students. We were surprised that 44% of respondents somewhat agreed and 22% agreed with the statement that fieldwork and internship supervisors share an equal responsibility. But just spend a moment and have a look at the spread of the responses. We asked whether the respondents felt that the exam was not valid, whether recent changes made the exam too hard, and whether they felt some of the exam is irrelevant to competent and safe practice. In responding to the statement the exam is not valid, 48% disagreed or somewhat disagreed, and 38% somewhat agreed and agreed or agreed. When asked whether some of the exam was irrelevant to competent and or safe practice, 28% somewhat disagreed or disagreed, and 48% somewhat agreed or agreed. Again, suggesting a wide variety of perceptions about the exam and varying levels of disagreement and agreement. Academic preparation for the exam and its effectiveness. Faculty were asked if they or their academic program provided specific preparation for the CBMT exam. At the time of the survey, 59% said that they did, and 41% said that they did not. And when asked how effective they felt they were in preparing in their preparation activities, while only 4.5% one person felt that they were ineffective, 57% felt that they were somewhat effective, and 28.5% that they were effective. An interesting perception given the changes to first-time pass rates. When asked about specific exam preparation methods, 32% of those people who provide exam preparation include formal instruction with an unspecified content. 25% include instructional methods within a specific course or courses. 21% include specific exam preparation outside class, and then informal instruction, distribution of materials, and in internship seminars. Lillian, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. So we asked a number of open-ended questions. We had 6 questions with a total of 180 responses. And let me just explain to you how this worked. So you can go to the next slide. So what we did was count the number of responses in these open-ended questions. And so some participants commented long paragraphs in which we were able to extract certain points. And so some people might have made a comment in 3 different categories, whereas other people might have made a comment in 1. So these percentages here will not add up to 100, but this percentage on the left will reflect the number of people who out of the entire, so the percentage out of the entire people who responded to that question who felt that way, who had that perception. So all in all, when we looked at these narrative responses, 54% questioned or criticized the exam's ability to evaluate clinical competence. 41% felt that the exam primarily evaluated test-taking abilities. And 31% felt that the exam evaluated music therapy interns' ability to practice competently and safely or safely. And 8% stated that they were unsure of what the exam would evaluate. And so these were the narrative responses overall. And so when we break down further into some of the concerns about why faculty felt that they might be failing the exam, again in the open-ended questions, 62% of those responses were related to a comment about concerns with construct validity. And in particular, they were concerned with the ability of the exam to measure entry-level competency. That was the largest grouping of responses to students, why students might be failing the exam. A further 24% felt that the CBMT might have made some erroneous assumptions regarding the reasons why they believed students were failing the exam. 21% commented that the undergraduate curriculum cannot expand to reflect the breadth and depth of our developing practice, and this is causing problems with preparing students. 21% also believe that issues of poor communication between organizations, the CBMT, and educators were causing difficulties with preparing students. Then there were 17% who had concerns, who stated this in narrative responses about concerns with the exam, with the content validity, meaning that often there's more than one correct answer to make in any clinical situation, depending on the context and the perspective and the approach, and that the exam assumed that there was one response. And so that was a concern for a number of people. Others felt that there were problems related to the disconnect among the requirements related to the governing organizations. And so we have a curriculum requirement with NASM, and then we have competencies with the AMTA, and then we have a different set of domains with the CBMT. And so that created some problems. And 7% believe that, in fact, the faculty might not be current with evidence practice in their teaching, and that might be why students are having problems. And we asked then in open-ended questions about what did program directors feel were the barriers to preparing students to pass the exam. And 32% talked about the lack of knowledge about the exam content and the fact that we don't have any experience doing the exam, so we don't quite know how to prepare students for it. Again, in this question, the point about undergraduate curriculum was insufficient. We had insufficient time in music therapy. We didn't have enough time and space to really deal with the breadth and depth of knowledge and the practice skills required to prepare students for competent practice at this point in our field. 9% felt that many students have a weakness with analytical and critical thinking skills, rendering them less effective as test takers. Some people also felt that, students might wait too long after their internship and neglect to take the exam, by which time they've kind of lost some of their academic learning and their clinical expertise. Other people felt that the NASM curriculum focusing on Western music didn't allow us to prepare our students adequately. And a couple of people brought up that persons who are not native English speakers have additional problems with the structure of the exam because of the nature of the exam. And so these were all reasons that directors thought that we might be having trouble preparing students for the exam. So when asked what changes program directors would like to make to the exam, interestingly enough, 85% of the responses said that various changes needed to be made. There were a number of changes, but 85% wanted change. 15% found that the exam is perfectly accurate, valid, reflects current practice, and that no changes were needed. And so that made up our 100%. And then there were a 21% in there that really expressed additional concerns about the lack of educators' knowledge about the exam content, about changes that might be being made to the exam, changes that to the focus of the exam that faculty may not know, and just general lack of communication about how we can prepare students. And so then we asked about solutions, and there were a number of solutions. These were the most popular ones. So many people brought up that the content of an entry-level exam should not include something like a psychodynamic approach or information learned in institute trainings. That has no place in an entry-level exam. I'm not saying that it is there, just that these are what faculty said. It has no place there. Some faculty felt that the practice analysis should not include music therapists with graduate degrees in special institute trainings, particularly because we don't know how that information is used and how that data is separated or broken down. And so this response was based on the assumption that this data was being used to create the exam, which we don't know. A number of other program directors believe that if we could establish a greater alignment between the organizational requirements, the board of the domains and the competencies of AMTA and Cbmt, that would be very helpful. Also, other program directors suggested looking at NASM and looking at the basic curriculum for music therapy programs and seeing how we can adjust some of those core music courses to really help us develop our students' music therapy skills. And many people propose the idea that has been used in so many other professions, which is to have an entry-level exam and then to have advanced level practices or specializations or certifications or something of that nature. So those were the most popular solutions. And
sorry.
Yes, we're done. We can go on. Philip. And not to implode on your discussion, but all in all, from these perceptions of the directors, the main areas that we came up with were construct validity. So are students evaluated from one approach? Is it too narrow? Content validity. How was the exam created? We simply don't know anything about the practice analysis, how the people with more experience, how their answers are being used to create the exam, or perhaps they're not being used at all, and perhaps the Cbmt is only looking at first and second year. The point is that what was brought up among the faculty is that we don't know how this is being created, and so it creates some concern. We also wondered that the mission of the Cbmt is to make sure that our clients are safe and that music therapists are practicing safely. That's the nature of any license. And so we want to know, does this exam really ensure client safety? And is there any data to support this claim? And then there were concerns about just the whole curriculum and the curriculum overload. And there was an additional concern that Tony and I added here. This did not come from the data, but we thought it was important to mention after reviewing all of this. And it really comes down to the ethical question. After 4.5 years of education and money, many students cannot pass this exam. Well, a number of students can't pass this exam. And very often we might see students at the beginning in their first or second year who we know are going to have difficulties. What is our responsibility? Or we may have alternately, students we see that are really great clinicians and just lack some of those skills, that test taking skills, etc., and they can't pass the exam. And so this does, I know every other profession has to deal with this, but it does in some cases bring up a glaring ethical question. And so that is also a concern that we had. Tony, I don't know if you want to add anything to.
No, I think it's great. Yeah.
So that's it. That's
Okay.
short and skinny.
Thank you very much again, Lillian and Tony, for your work and your presentation. We're hoping this information from their research has gotten into your brains and got them humming as we're about to set off into breakout rooms now. So it's about 37 past the hour. We're going to go until, and this is more just for the moderators as you set up timekeeping, we're going to go until about 10 past the hour, and we'll see how that goes. For enough time in the breakouts to kind of generate some discussion and then come back out. So the plan is that right now we're going to randomize everyone into the breakout rooms to try to keep the groups as small as we can based on the number of moderators that we have. The moderators will keep time, reintroduce the topics, and help introduce and help organize the reporting out to the whole group later. So we recommend that moderators, when you're in the group, try to find somebody who's willing to kind of record, take some notes, and then Susie will be moderating back when we come back to the large group. When we do come back to the large group, if individuals have some questions or comments, they can signal that if they'd like to say something outside of each group's kind of collated response. Give us just a few minutes right now to do the randomization, and then we'll move the moderators into the various Zoom rooms. And this part of the evening will not be recorded. It won't be on the YouTube recording that we'll put out later. So moderators, just go ahead and follow the leader of your group in whatever way makes most sense for everyone there. Please copy the questions that hopefully they'll be going in the chat in just a second, the moderating questions that we put together. And then you can paste them in everybody's breakout rooms. You're all welcome to go ahead and grab them as well. Or consider other ways that individuals might take notes to report out. The steering committee also would love a copy of the notes from each group sent to musictherapyfaculty@gmail.com. That was also in the chat earlier. We'll repost it when we come back at the end of the event. So whoever's taking notes, please make sure that you send them out via email towards the end of the event tonight. So moderators, again, please make sure you have a spokesperson to share with the group when we rejoin together, and we'll have each group just report out a little bit for the sake of time. And again, we'll try to come back in about 30 minutes from now at about 10 past the hour. So that's it. Let's get off into our rooms. You can see there are our questions, so you can go ahead and grab those, copy and paste them there.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Everybody got back to this room okay? I think we're all back. I hope you had productive conversations. We certainly did in my group. We're going to throw out a 2-question poll for you to answer as you get reoriented to our large group. Raquel, can we post that so everybody can take the poll? There we go. So let's all take this poll. I'll give you another minute there to think about it. Okay, I think everybody answered the questions. Raquel, can we show the results of that poll? All right. Oh my goodness. Well, resounding yeses. I think we all want better communication with Cbmt about what's going on with the test. And we all seem to see the need to have the test in other languages, and that hasn't been possible. Thank you for providing those answers. All things to think about. There are a million things to think about. So let's go to tackle some of the questions. Let's start with the first one, which is kind of a broad discussion question about whether we feel the Cbmt exam measures what we want our students to know: theoretical knowledge, clinical application, or clinical competence. Andy, can we get a sense from your group where you went with this question a little bit?
We had a long discussion about that. So Lillian took notes for us, actually. She was in our group.
Oh, great.
If her cat will let her speak. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, it's a challenge. So a couple of people brought up that, in the past, questions might have been too specific, and don't know if that's going on now, but really based on a depth knowledge of a particular population. We wondered if this exam is really a reflection of the knowledge of the average student. Then there was a concern about the practice analysis, and that it includes new professionals, but they also might be MLE, like they might be equivalency students, or they might have other trainings, and this might be affecting the domains and the kinds of questions that are being asked and the creation of the new domains, because we have so many MLEs coming in with backgrounds in other areas, or just life experience. And so that might have played into the job analysis task. So that's a question. Another concern was that many students have reported that the best way to pass the exam is to answer the way that you can tell the test writer wants you to. So learning how to take a test, not learning how to be a good clinician. That you don't necessarily answer the way you would practice, but how you can tell how you could tell what the test taker wants. And people commented that, yes, students who were more reflective and intuitive, had a deeper approach to theory, had more problem and with taking the exam, and then wondered if really it serves as a gatekeeper when it needs to. And then also some concerns about, with COVID and with the interruptions in internships, how were students on the coming exams going to do?
Great. Our group had similar ideas, so I'm glad we're along the same lines, including the idea of MLE or any kind of advanced trainings that student had. How can they separate that training when they're, invited for the practice analysis? How can they take that out and remember what it was like not to have that training? So we're talking about depth and levels. And Kathy, you talked about that. Kathy Murphy was on my group, and we talked about that a lot. Does any other group want to chime in for any other additional ideas about this group? Andrew, Melanie, Deb?
My group had Deanna and Petra, and they shared some background information which might be useful for the entire group. I'm not sure whether they want to jump in with a short summary.
I think Petra shared some links to CBMT educational videos on the practice analysis process, and that, we're not testing, the exam doesn't test the students' abilities and competence. It actually is looking at entry-level competence to be a practitioner. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So it's testing on the job skills as reported by people that are working as music therapists. It's not testing on the professional competencies of AMTA. So they're very distinct processes that are reciprocal documents. But I would encourage everybody to look at the educational videos that CBMT is putting together. CBMT as a whole is working very hard to provide greater education to these processes that are aligned with our accrediting agency, which is the National Commission on Credentialing Agencies. As I said in my group, this is the same organization that credentials nurses, accountants, lawyers. So there are standards that CBMT has to meet. We have to be accredited every 5 years, and that the practice analysis exam and the test writing process and the exam development are actually facilitated by PSI, which is a psychometric company that ensures the validity of the exam. So just please watch those videos and then reach out when you have questions, because there are some misunderstandings in the perceptions that we have about the exam. And
Really?
It's complex.
And I would like to add on to Deanna's report here that I have been on the practice analysis for the document that came out as a liaison from the board. And I can reassure you that none of the advanced practices have been included in this document, because we are looking for entry-level practice, what a clinician needs to know in the practice, what they need to do in the first years of their practice when they are out in the field. So intentionally, all those people who are on the practice analysis focus group, I would say, and the first level of preparing that document are making really sure that it's entry-level items on that list that a music therapist currently needs on a job. And all those items are also drawn from job descriptions, from employers, from advertisement for jobs, and so forth. We had to do a 2 weeks task list of everything we do every day. And so this went into a document which PSI, the psychometric company, then was evaluating. That has been reviewed then by the focus group again, then turned into a survey which you all, over 9,000 MTBCs, should have received. And then it was evaluated how many of you are doing this job item. And then if that has been confirmed that the majority is doing it, it went on the domain list. So it's a very rigorous scientific process of getting to those items that are actually listed as what you need to do as a music therapist. And as Deanna said, it's not about what you need to learn in your education and what you have probably on your syllabi. It is about what a music therapist needs to be able to do safe and competent practices out in the field the first 5 years.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I think we appreciate the amount of work that goes into creating an exam like this. In my particular group, there was discussion about some new ways that things are being looked at from other professions in terms of showing people a video of something, or we could include music but we realize how long it takes for a new question even to come through, that has to go through so many channels. But we're looking forward to using technology to maybe get closer to what a person's experience is when they're doing clinical work, as opposed to taking a standardized test. So the rigor is super important, and we're appreciative of that. However, the study seems to show that there seems to be a kind of broad range of perceptions about about how the test measures competence as clinicians. So that's why we're discussing it tonight, and to get people's feelings. So let's go to a different question and see where we can move on from here. Some of the things that we discussed in my group were about what do we need to know from CBMT? What would help us in education and preparation? And I realized that that there needs to be a separation, that they can't give us a test as educators, that's not allowed. But what do some of the groups have to say about that? I mean, Deb, do you want to talk about what your group, maybe, did you get a chance to tackle that question at all?
Yeah, we did, and somebody in the group did point out that that if CBMT provides us with too much of it, then there's a conflict of interest, that they need to be testing, they need to truly be evaluating entry level. But the group talked about ways that perhaps the educators could get how to prepare for the test guide, and that students are requesting more information, how to take the test and how to prepare for the tests, that the domain areas don't seem to be enough for them. The students want to know what to do and how to prepare. And so we that was, I think, the biggest thing that we, is there's some way to do that without the conflict of interest, was the biggest thing that we in our group.
Great, thank you. And what do people feel about having some kind of coordination of some kind of training or preparation course that's across the board? I mean, my group, we talked about the different, it wasn't just philosophies. Kathy, what did you say? It was the different, just different parts of the country teach in different ways, and they emphasize different things in different ways. And then I mentioned that it could also be different philosophies. And like Lillian, like you said, you have to read the question as to who wrote the question and think about what orientation are they coming from. So would it be useful if there was some kind of course that all students could tap into, that might unify and maybe equal things out? What do people think about that? Melanie or Andrew, you want to talk about what your group thinks about that area?
I just, a quick chime in on that one was actually something that I was saying, but I'll also ask Trish to chime in because since she took the notes, if there was something else that I'm leaving out. I was just mentioning that one of the things that seems to be happening is that I didn't realize, and maybe until about 3 or 4 years ago, is that there seems to be like an underground way that the students are just creating their own practice tests. They are all going, like, as interns, they'll finish up, they're going taking the exam, and they're trying to remember as many questions as they can, and then they're putting it online in some music therapy student Twitter or Reddit or something like that, and in lieu of something that they feel is more comprehensive, they're just like, well, how do we get access to these questions? How do we know what's actually on there? And then, so they're kind of just crowdsourcing that information in a weird way that I didn't know existed, and certainly wasn't around when I took the exam that I was talking to my group about. And in any case, maybe I'll just leave it there. Trish, was there anything that might apply to that question?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a couple different times, but I'm glad Petra brought up nursing, because I would believe that nursing professors do actually know what's on the NCLEX exam, and that law professors do know what's on the bar exam, and that it's not a mystery. And this is not what we talked about, but I'm utterly confused with the statement that what's on our syllabi really doesn't prepare students for the test. Then I'm not sure what the role of educators are in prepping students for the test. If it's not what we're teaching them, then we do need a practice. We do need a test prep offering, because clearly educators are not responsible for teaching students what the test is about. But we all know that test prep classes are a problem for students who are financially strapped and pressured, because only the rich students get to go to those classes, and students that might struggle in other ways, or students that aren't financially stable, won't be able to take that. So I would I would hope that if a test prep situation happened, that it would be one that was egalitarian and equitable, but also I would love to hear more about why what we're teaching on our syllabi is not going to line up with the test, because that was confusing to me. And my last point is that what came up was that the test is theoretically biased in that it does require or ask students to answer in a specific way, which is tied to a theoretical orientation. And that if you happen to work in a program or teach in a program where that orientation is not front and center, then students that come out of that program won't necessarily be able to figure out the key to answering the questions. I have a student, when I ask the practice exam questions, say, I know that's not what the test wants me to answer. I know what this is what the test wants me to answer. So I'm not, I think it's just making me more confused than less. Thank you.
Thank you,
Can I
Trish.
respond to that? Because I think those are some really important issues, Trish.
Yeah, I just want to be mindful of our time. We only have 3 minutes left, and I want to give Tony and Lillian the last word. I don't know. Can you, Deanna? Can you do it in 30 seconds or less?
I can try. I think the thing is, Trish, I think there's so much confusion because when was the last time we took the exam, right? Like we don't see the exam, and to be really transparent, I'm currently chair of the board of directors for CBMT. So I've been gathering some of this information because I think the perceptions are really important to understand. And I think Lillian and Tony, thank you for doing this study because it really has illuminated, right? But I think to respond to that theoretical orientation, because that's something that has come up for years and years and years and years, the test writers are trained by PSI to write the questions regardless of orientation and are representative of all orientations reflected on the practice analysis survey. So it is really important that when you get that survey, MTBCs take the survey because that's what guides the exam.
Thank you. So Tony and Lillian, first of all, I want to thank you so much for sharing your work with us and got us all talking. Obviously, there are a lot of strains to this. So we're going to be collating all this information, and we hope the conversation doesn't end here, that we're going to hopefully move towards move towards something else with the data that you've come up with. Is there anything you'd like to add as we finish, or does anybody have any question that they want to either put in the chat or ask Tony or Lillian? Any final words, Tony and Lillian?
I'll just add, I think that clarity around theoretical orientation from CBMT is essential. Because my takeaway is, for those of you who read the article, is that the exam does privy one theoretical perspective, that is it written in a way which is cognitive behavioural, and that it's an interesting conundrum if CBMT is saying that the exams are written in a way that all theoretical perspectives, if I understood Deanna's response, and that could be just because she was trying to do something very brief. Because the reality is that not all theoretical perspectives are the same, and that the value of a theoretical perspective is that it conceives of a person in a different kind of way, and it privies certain kind of knowledge over other kind of knowledge, and that's why we have differences of theoretical perspective. So, I'm really curious to know how CBMT believes it can collapse theoretical perspective into a perspective in which it is cross-theoretical and treats knowledge in a way which is equitable for all theoretical perspectives. That doesn't seem possible to me. So I would love to know more about how CBMT does that, because I think that as soon as you ask questions about the first and the best thing to do, it's a perspective. And it's not a perspective that's shared by all academic programs.
Thank you, Tony. I think we'll let you have the last word since you wrote the article. author. Andrew, you want to
Sure.
take us home?
I'll also I'll also add my thanks to Lillian and Tony and to all of you for joining us tonight. On behalf of the rest of the steering committee, we thank all of you for attending and taking an active role tonight. We've asked everyone to take a short survey at the end of each of these faculty forum events. That link is in the chat. It's the one that looks like Colo State and Qualtrics and everything. And we'll also have that posted on the Music Therapy Faculty Facebook page, and it'll come to you in a follow-up email that'll also have the link to this video. And then there'll also be a link to the YouTube site that hosts all these different videos. So if there's anything that you'd like to go back to and view, if it was one of the events that we did video record. So please make sure that you click on that link to help us inform these educator gatherings. It's just maybe a 5-minute survey to help us out there. Again, if you have any more questions or comments, please email us at musictherapyfaculty@gmail.com. It's music therapy faculty, all one word. And then also the people who are either the moderators and or the note takers tonight, if you'd please send us just whatever sort of collated notes that you have, so that the steering committee can take a look at that and put that information together as well. Thank you all again, and look out for our next event. It'll be Compassion and Capacity Part 2, and it'll be coming next month. Compassion and Capacity Part 1 was the one that we did on March 30th. That was sort of an update on teaching in the time of COVID. So we'll have our Part 2 version of that coming next month. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your night.